Hello, friends, and welcome back to another NBA Insider video live stream notebook right here on the one and only Bleacher Report app. And a thank you, as always, to those who tune in on YouTube as well. My name is Jake Fischer, your resident NBA insider for all things Bleacher Report. My voice is a little hoarse after attending last night's Philadelphia Eagles game, but we have a ton of NBA news and notes to get to, and we are not taking a break. We are getting right to it because right before we came to you live today, I got news from cap friends around the league that the NBA sent out a memo stating that the salary cap is going to be increasing. The projection for the 2026-2027 season, not the 25-26 season, as I faultily put in my original tweet, is going to increase by $1 million. There you see the point of clarification right there. There is stuff happening. There is going to be a Board of Governors meeting next week, and there has been a change of representation once again for former three-time NBA All-Star Ben Simmons. That is the first official topic on our rundown for today. Again, Ben Simmons, if you guys recall, started his career being represented by one Rich Paul at Clutch Sports. He was part of the LeBron Mafia. He was next up. He was the young prince training with the king. And then his representation kind of took a turn after Simmons's initial holdout situation with Philadelphia, when Rich Paul and Clutch Sports were going up against Daryl Morey and the Philadelphia 76ers. Remember that whole holdout situation where Ben Simmons had an advance payment in his contract, and there was a whole back and forth between freezing those funds and getting that money back and what have you. And eventually, Rich Paul distanced himself from Ben Simmons and dropped him as a client. Simmons, of course, later gets traded by Philadelphia that season at the trade deadline for James Harden and becomes a Brooklyn Net, which then led Ben to this recent part of his career after being let go and waived by Brooklyn to be a guy entering the buyout market. And all that latest, stretch of his tenure in the NBA was under the representation of Bernie Lee, who is most famously known as Jimmy Butler's agent. But my partner at the Stein line on Substack, the Hall of Famer Mark Stein, reported yesterday that Bernie Lee announced, or at least Bernie Lee told the players union, he notified the players union that he has formally removed himself from representing Ben Simmons as well. This is the second time now that this has happened for Ben Simmons, and I don't think that is necessarily a coincidence. To my understanding, to what I'm really able to report right now, there has only been minimum offers available to Ben Simmons on this offseason marketplace. And as I believe Steph Bondy of the New York Post reported, there is belief that Ben Simmons is, quote, questioning his NBA future. And I think for anyone who was an all-star, for anyone who was making maximum contract money, which again, Ben Simmons did, if you guys recall, the Sixers essentially chose between these two once upon a time Bernie Lee clients in Ben Simmons and Jimmy Butler in that 2018 offseason, 2019 offseason that led to Jimmy Butler being signed and traded to Miami. Ben was with Clutch at the time. But for any player who was making max money, same thing with Russell Westbrook. When Russell Westbrook was bought out after he was traded to the Utah Jazz, he took situations with the Clippers and the Denver Nuggets, respectively, at deals that were right above the veteran minimum. For a guy who used to make that much money, even for someone like Malcolm Brogdon, it's hard to accept that you are a veteran minimum salary player. And that's just where Ben Simmons is right now. So I can't report any more specifics at this juncture, but I can definitely tell you that this iceberg tip that has emerged from the surface about Ben Simmons' uncertain offseason, the fact that his agent Bernie Lee has parted ways in that representation agreement, it is certainly indicative of the fact that Ben Simmons is potentially or is just struggling to figure out and find a home that A is north of the veteran minimum, but also come to grips with that reality that he is that type of player at this point in time. Because it wasn't long ago that Ben Simmons was a prized young asset of an NBA team like Jonathan Kuminga on a rookie scale contract looking to get paid to the nth degree. And that is still where things stand between Jonathan Kuminga and the Golden State Warriors as we come to you for our first NBA Insider live stream notebook in the month of September, the month that we have been saying for weeks now we were going to be talking about Jonathan Kuminga because just like with Josh Giddey and Quentin Grimes, who we'll talk about later in the show, Jonathan Kuminga will have until October 1st, until his qualifying offer, his $8 million, his $7.9 million to be exact, qualifying offer from the Golden State Warriors will expire. And until then, and until we get some real movement from the Warriors side about what they're willing to offer Kuminga in terms of money, in terms of years, in terms of what the potential player option situation or team option situation could look like, we are not going to be getting a resolution to Jonathan Kuminga's ongoing restricted free agency. Now, unlike Cam Thomas, who we'll talk about later on in the show, Kuminga and his position has been emboldened by the fact that he has received legitimate interest from other teams, most notably the Sacramento Kings and the Phoenix Suns, both teams that offered multi-year contracts, 4-year contracts with player options on that 4th year, verbally speaking, to Jonathan Kuminga. They were not going to sign an offer sheet for Jonathan Kuminga, knowing full well that Golden State would just match that right away. But because that money has at least been out there on the table conceptually, that has led Jonathan Kuminga to anchor down and put his feet in the sand and say that he has no reason to take the 2-year 45, 48, whatever exactly the number, I forget off the top of mind, that Golden State has offered Jonathan Kuminga. That has been basically half of the 4-year, roughly $90 million, for example, that Phoenix has put out there in the open that they would be willing to pay Jonathan Kuminga under their current cap flexibility if they could have found a workable sign and trade agreement that would have enticed Golden State enough. But the Warriors have stood firm all along in that they don't see any reason why they should change their offer. They haven't gotten anything from Phoenix or from Sacramento that the Warriors deem would make them better or that would just be worth Jonathan Kuminga or better than Jonathan Kuminga. There's only really also been sign and trade scenarios from those teams that would potentially lead Golden State in a salary matching standpoint to part ways with Buddy Hield or Moses Moody, 2 players that the Warriors just absolutely do not want to part with in any scenario. That would also have them lose their greatest, young player, their greatest upside lottery ticket in Jonathan Kuminga. So at this point in time, we are still waiting for one of these sides to blink in this quote unquote staring contest that Jonathan Kuminga's agent, Aaron Turner, has labeled it, that the Warriors have labeled it. But there's still plenty of time here. We're only at September 15th. We're in September finally, but we still have 3+ weeks left until that October 1st deadline. And I think there is some hope that, next week over the weekend is when players and teams will start to go back into their respective practice facilities, that maybe Steph Curry gets in the building and starts looking around, and Jimmy Butler gets in the building and starts looking around, and they're like, all right, we either want Jonathan Kuminga back here or we got to get some type of resolution. I think that is kind of the hope for some people involved, that now players are back and in the swing of things, that there can be some movement here. So we shall see. But for now, Kuminga's side has been adamant that they are willing to take that qualifying offer if the Warriors don't change their stance, their offer. So at this point in time, if I had to make a prediction, again, only on September 5th, there could be plenty that changes between now and then. But if the Warriors don't change something in terms of the years, the money, the strong stance that they are not going to give Jonathan Kuminga a player option, and they would want him to nullify his no trade clause in any scenario that could happen in a 1+1 type agreement, then Kuminga is very willing to bet on himself and take the qualifying offer. That is where things still stand. To the chat, Jake Kleem says Ben should come back to Philly on a redemption season. There had been some overtures, I would say, between Ben Simmons and the Sixers once he was securing a buyout from Brooklyn. He still has some friends in the area. I believe his brother was living in Philadelphia for a time, and there was some interest from Philadelphia at that point in time. But I can't say I have any updated information on the Sixers' interest in Ben Simmons there. And I do think Embiid and Ben have repaired that type of fracturing that went down behind the scenes as well. Speaking of Golden State, Hayden wants to know, is Horford to the Dubs done deal? Is it still being worked out? Like we've said in past iterations of our notebook here, Al Horford's contract and the number that he could ultimately be paid by Golden State is going to be dependent upon what this ultimate outcome is on Jonathan Kuminga's free agency. So it's not necessarily a done deal, but the whole league and the Golden State Warriors in particular are absolutely moving and operating as if Horford will be with the Warriors and potentially their starting center. I think that's part of the plan. And it's just a matter of if, not when, and how much. And with his patience, will he be rewarded with a player option as he continues to consider whether or not to retire year after year? That's kind of been a question for him ever since the 2024 championship when Boston raised that 18th banner with the Celtics. So I'm not expecting he's going to be going elsewhere, but for now, it's just a matter of how much will be left over with the Warriors' salary cap sheet, depending upon luxury tax implications and what have you, depending upon what Jonathan Kuminga's number is or if there is a sign and trade and all that type of stuff. Goyato wants to know, does Cam Thomas's signing his qualifying offer seem to have changed the calculus of other restricted free agents? And I don't really think so, because Cam Thomas's situation is very different from Jonathan Kuminga's, is very different from Josh Giddey's, and is very different from Quentin Grimes. Jonathan Kuminga, for example, is like the one blue chip player that the Warriors have on their roster who, by all accounts, their owner, Joe Lacob, has a very, very strong affinity for. Cam Thomas is really a high volume scorer in the middle of a rebuild where the Nets just drafted 5 first-round picks, and he is not like the real upside prize prospect on that roster anymore that he was when he was first drafted there, when Kevin Durant gave his stamp of approval that Cam Thomas is a bucket getter that I like. We'll talk more about Cam Thomas, Josh Giddey, and Quentin Grimes, but we have to get to the biggest story that has been going on in the NBA all week. Something that a league source of mine said to me today early on the phone has actually been good for conversation for the NBA. This ongoing dilemma, saga about Kawhi Leonard and potentially the Clippers circumventing the salary cap, as reported by Pablo Torre and his podcast. Pablo Torre finds out about a $28 million and potentially as much as a $50 million overall total endorsement deal from Aspiration, which, if you guys have not been following, was a company that made an official team sponsorship with the Clippers that Steve Ballmer invested money in. And therefore, there have been allegations put forth by Pablo Torre's podcast that the Clippers, by way of Steve Ballmer investing in this company that then paid Kawhi Leonard $50 million, found a way to give Kawhi Leonard more money than he was contractually owed by the Clippers. You see the timeline on the screen here. This was not anything in relation to that original July 2019 contract, but his second contract extension with the Clippers that came into play right after Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers signed his second deal in 2021. Now, it is way too early to come here before you all and talk about what I think is going to definitively happen, because the NBA is in the very, very early throes of first seeing this information that has really only come to light because this company, Aspiration, that was presenting as a one-of-a-kind green initiative opportunity to help companies like the Clippers and whoever neutralize their carbon footprints and plant trees and all this stuff. That company filed for bankruptcy, which has then put all this paperwork and what have you into the public and allowed Pablo Torre's group to start looking through that paperwork and see that a LLC called KL2 Aspire, Kawhi Leonard's LLC that he founded basically only to get money from Aspire, was being charged as an aggrieved company from aspiration, not paying out on this deal, this endorsement deal. So it's going to ultimately come down to whether or not the league can find definitive evidence that Steve Ballmer and the Clippers directly paid this company aspiration to directly pay Kawhi Leonard. And right now, I can tell you just from early conversations around the league, it's going to be really hard for the NBA to definitively prove that. The Clippers have put out multiple statements now denying that they have any, knowledge of this, and that they're going to be willing to assist and prove that all these assertions are false. But it is certainly glaring, especially being that compared to the other celebrity endorsers that aspiration had on file, the Robert Downey Jr.'s and the Leonardo DiCaprios of the world, who were all making far less money than Kawhi Leonard's first $7 million per year in a 4-year deal. And there was that secondary reporting from the Sports Business Journal and then Pablo Torre's podcast as well that number was actually $48 million, $50 million. That was a substantially above market value endorsement contract for Kawhi Leonard, and that there was no need for him to render any services to collect that money. That right there, according to some of my lawyer friends around the league, was the most glaring aspect of all of this. However, the NBA is going to have to find definitive proof that this was a scheme and a design in order to get Kawhi Leonard more money than what the Clippers could have legally or contractually allowed him to be paid in accordance with the CBA. And the NBA is not the federal government. They don't have subpoena power. They don't have the opportunity to just snap their fingers and demand the Clippers to turn over certain things. So this is not going to be a straightforward, cut and dry situation. As Scopes in the chat is saying, it's going to be hard. Robert Sarver, there was direct evidence. Donald Sterling, there was direct evidence. Joe Smith, there was direct evidence. The league is going to have to find absolute direct evidence that links the Clippers to Kawhi's side deal. And as Nate Jones, a very noted NBA player agent, marketing deal executive, is going to already outlined, this is not like common. This amount of money is not common. The amount that Kawhi has gotten from aspiration here, but it is very common for star players of NBA teams to have separate endorsement deals from companies that are team sponsors. Jason Tatum with the Celtics, Joel Embiid with Crypto.com that was sponsoring the Sixers jersey patch are just two that come to mind. This is kind of a common thing, and that's not to allege that Jason Tatum and Joel Embiid are collecting, shady funds that are being alleged to this degree. But that general mechanism of an NBA player, a star player, having an additional endorsement deal from a team sponsor, that is common in the NBA. And there are certain things in that, like the clause about that deal expiring if a player no longer plays for that team, is common as well. So King Gorman wants to know, what do I think the punishment is going to be if proven? That's so hard to predict, especially because Steve Ballmer is a very, very, very good partner for the NBA. He is one of the richest men in the world. He's put together this state-of-the-art arena that the league wants to be hosting all-star games like in 2026 and hosting basketball in the Olympics in 2028 and investing money in this overall league operation and helping, move this thing forward and generally globally expand the NBA business like their plans to foray into Europe. They don't want Steve Ballmer to be an enemy. They don't want to potentially put sanctions down or whatever that's going to have Steve Ballmer take the league to court, where him and his $170 billion is potentially a stronger opponent for the NBA than the NBA itself. So I'm going to tread very carefully, and I'm going to be very pessimistic that there's going to be actual concrete evidence to find any guilt or fault here for the Clippers breaking this, CBA cap circumvention legality here. And also, if there is some type of real concrete evidence that the league finds, I'm going to be very curious to see what actual degree that there is because of how beneficial a partner Steve Ballmer is. He is, quote unquote, the best owner in the NBA. He's willing to fund a state-of-the-art arena by himself. He's willing to sit courtside and engage and what have you. He's not someone the NBA wants to turn into a villain by any stretch, unlike certain, a predecessor of his that operated the Clippers franchise. So back to the restricted free agent market, where we talked about Cam Thomas agreeing to his qualifying offer. That came earlier this week. And again, that situation was very different from Jonathan Kuminga's, and it's different from the other guys below on the rundown, being that Cam Thomas, the Brooklyn Nets have kind of passed him by. Like I said earlier, he is not this blue chip prospect that they are focused on developing right now. They're developing 5 other first-round picks. They're focused on not exactly winning games this season and hopefully having better lottery luck than a year ago for this 2026 upcoming class, headlined by AJ Dembonsa and Cam Boozer. And the Nets never really offered Cam Thomas much more than a 2-year deal, to my understanding. So Cam Thomas is betting on himself. I know there was plenty of people on the league and people in Cam Thomas's ear telling him to take what Brooklyn was offering, but to my understanding, Cam Thomas believes in himself as one of the top bucket getters in this league and someone who should be at least in the Emmanuel Quickly $30 million average annual value type of ballpark, and potentially someone as high as Desmond Bane. Like, he sees himself as that type of player. So what does he do? He takes this 1-year guaranteed $6 million qualifying offer, and he's going to get out and unrestricted free agency a year from now, where he has a no trade clause this year. Brooklyn can't move him to any situation he doesn't want to go to, and he'll be able to bet on himself and see what he can do. It's curious, though, because now the Nets don't really exactly have any incentive to put Cam Thomas in a situation where he can go out and show the world that he's worth what he wants to get. While they, again, have 5 first-round picks that they're going to want to develop, in addition to other young players on that roster like Day'Ron Sharpe and who what have you, that Brooklyn does see as part of their future. Because Cam Thomas clearly wants to play out this year and then get out of Dodge and go get paid somewhere else. So it's a murky situation and one that's going to be interesting to follow. Moving on to Josh Giddey and Quentin Grimes, as we're running out of time here. Josh Giddey's situation is different from these other guys too, because the Chicago Bulls traded for him, and they traded a 2-time champion, Alex Caruso, and they want Josh Giddey to be their point guard of the future. Unlike Golden State, the Bulls have not entertained sign and trade inquiries. They have told other teams, don't give us an offer. Don't even talk trade. We're keeping Josh Giddey. But they've been firm all along that they won't go north of a 4-year, $80 million offer for Giddey. Now, Bobby Marks at ESPN reported this week that the Bulls moved up a bit and got to 4 years, $88 million. So is that a sign of subtraction here that Chicago is moving up from 20 to 22 AAV compared to Giddey's 30? And are we going to get to some middle ground, more around 25, 26? That's always been the thought around the league, that they'll get there because Giddey wants the Bulls and the Bulls want Giddey. So we'll see ultimately as we get closer to October 1st how willing both of those sides are going to be to budge. Because again, just like Jonathan Kuminga, just like Cam Thomas, Josh Giddey and his representation are confident that there's going to be, roughly around the league, there's an estimate that there's going to be at least 5 to 6 teams with max cap space next summer, maybe more, depending on how all these books shape up. And again, as we talked about at the top of this, I reported today, the salary cap is moving up for 26-27, up to $166 million. So there's definitely a hope from all free agents, all incoming free agents for next summer, that there's going to be money to spend compared to this year when it was just the Brooklyn Nets who had legitimate cap space really to play with. So for now, Josh Giddey and the Bulls are still kind of incrementally moving towards a deal, let's say. I don't think Josh Giddey will ultimately take the qualifying offer. I do think Quentin Grimes allegedly has the chance to. I think there's a chance because unlike Josh Giddey, unlike Jonathan Kuminga, even though Philadelphia traded for Grimes, the Sixers are a contending team that has a lot of players in the backcourt at a similar position to Quentin Grimes. Quentin Grimes, generally speaking, in the backcourt is behind Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain and now VJ Edgecombe as well. Three, first round picks that this team drafted and has homegrown and plans to home grow. So I don't see them necessarily balking at Quentin Grimes' asking price here. However, there has been buzz all summer long about the Sixers looking to potentially move one of, if not both, Andre Drummond and Kelly Oubre. If they are able to find a deal for one of those two guys as we get closer to camp, that would open up some more wiggle room for Philadelphia to be able to pay Grimes a little bit more than what he's looking for right now and what that qualifying offer would be. So that situation, I think, is still one that's undetermined as well. Braden Smith's burner wants to know, does the new salary cap number help these free agents with new deals? It's going to help free agents next summer, like we talked about. It's going to overall more money in the marketplace helps free agents for sure, but it's going to help guys next summer, not this summer. Scopes wants to know, does Giddey's representatives mind a trade? I don't think they're not look. I have no knowledge. I've never heard that Josh Giddey and his side are looking to be traded. They want to get paid by Chicago, and if not, then they'll be confident in getting to the unrestricted free agent market next summer. But I have not heard of them asking for a trade by any stretch. It's unlike Kuminga. Kuminga's situation has been very willing to be signed and trade. They've gone out and gotten offers from Phoenix, from Sacramento. There's been some talk about Chicago being interested there as well. But I don't see Giddey's side looking for a trade whatsoever. Lastly, before we get out of here, Russell Westbrook still remains unsigned as well. And as we've talked about previously, there really has only been buzz and interest in Russell Westbrook, to our knowledge, all along from either Sacramento or New York. The Knicks still have multiple roster spots available. They were once upon a time seen to be a Ben Simmons home. They had some talks with Malcolm Brogdon as well. Russell Westbrook, though, I think has always had the strongest level of interest from Sacramento. But until Sacramento can make a move, and they've talked about Malik Monk trades all summer, but now it seems more likely that Devin Carter would potentially be moved than anybody else to create the flexibility to bring in Russell Westbrook. At this point in time, I don't know of another landing spot for Russell Westbrook in the NBA. And you're seeing veterans like Trey Lyles go overseas and sign with Real Madrid. Now, Russell Westbrook is obviously a much different caliber of player than Trey Lyles or Lonnie Walker, but we've seen a lot of guys, a lot of veterans recognize what their earning potential is in the NBA and go surpass it elsewhere. Ben Simmons is currently struggling with that same realization that outside of a veteran minimum, he doesn't have any options in the NBA right now. And there has not been one for Russell Westbrook. If there was an option for Russell Westbrook to have a deal in the NBA above the veteran minimum, he would have signed already. So, because we're here on Friday, September 5th at 5:30 Eastern time without a deal for Russell Westbrook, until the Kings create the space to bring him into that backup point guard capacity behind Dennis Schroeder that we know Sacramento Kings new general manager Scott Perry has wanted, we're waiting for a Russell Westbrook home. We're getting close to training camp. Now we can, we're getting close to deadlines and pressure and all that type of stuff, making deals happen. So we'll see as things get closer to October. But for now, Russell Westbrook is going to remain unsigned until the Sacramento Kings, to my understanding, have made a move that creates the flexibility to bring in Russell Westbrook. Hayden, for our last chat question of the day, wants to know, do they have to sign before training camp? The restricted free agents, that is. And the answer is no, because camp opens on the 29th and that deadline is October 1st. So there's a couple days of wiggle room before all that can really conclude. But for now, We're going to keep you updated next week, next Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. That'll be our next NBA Insider live stream notebook. And for now, we appreciate you all for tuning in. And I hope you have a good weekend. See ya.